It's me, it's Micah. Ever notice how what we watch shapes how we see the world? The shows we binge, the films we cry through, the roles that get cast or left out aren't just entertainment. They're shaping how we think about race, identity, relationships, and even ourselves. This week on Being with Micah, we're pulling back the curtain on Hollywood to talk about what it really means to be behind the scenes and in the making, both creatively and personally. Our guest is actor, writer, and filmmaker Jon Brown, and today we're unpacking what it takes to tell stories with integrity, the cost of constantly portraying Black trauma, and why turning down a commercial might be the boldest creative decision you make. We're also exploring the nuance of representation, how collaboration makes the magic happen, and why being intentional behind the camera matters just as much as who stands in front of it. So let's get into it. Okay, y'all, I am so excited about today's guest. We actually go way back. We met at Arizona State University and worked together in the IT department for the Cronkite School's journalism program. But even back then, Jon was already bringing creative energy to everything he touched. Since then, he's made major moves, graduating with a degree in film and media studies with an emphasis in screenwriting, moving to Atlanta, and diving full force into the industry. From Lifetime movies to commercials and background work on historical dramas, he's done a little bit of everything and is just getting started. He's got a heart for storytelling, a sharp eye for representation, and a real passion for building legacy through the power of film. Jon, welcome to Being with Micah.
Thank you, Micah. Thank you. That was so sweet.
Thank you for being here. I'm really excited. So let's go ahead and start from the beginning. What first sparked your interest in acting, writing, or filmmaking?
I think it starts with, well, I guess with film, it was watching films, watching movies with my parents and my brothers and stuff like that. And that started my love for film. My love for like screenwriting came from storytelling and like loving stories just in general. Like my parents read me stories when I was a kid. I loved that, you know what I mean? So that kind of built me or sent me down a path to where I was just like, yeah, I want to write stories. And then acting is because I'm the youngest, so I'm always like the goofball of the trio of boys. And so that kind of was like I was always a character because I was the youngest and the most, obnoxious.
Well, was there a moment or project as you started to grow up in your childhood where you realized, like, okay, yeah, this is exactly what I want to do?
I was when I went to college. Initially, my major was astrophysics, and I wanted to be an astrobiologist and study life in space.
Oh,
I
wow,
always
that's a
have it.
360.
I know, right? My dad was like, "What?" But so yeah, I switched my major. Well, initially I wanted to do astro, biology, and I was like struggling because I didn't love everything about astrobiology. There were just certain things that we would talk about that I was like, I don't know. Like my professor would be like, "Hey, in your lifetime, we're going to colonize Mars," and I just felt like that was like, how can we colonize another planet when we have, things that are not, really doing well here? So I was like, it was bothering me. Also, I just didn't want to take vector calculus. I was like, this is not like I love stars and space and stuff like that, but there were just things that were just really not interesting me. And so I took some cool electives, like, I took Mandarin, I took anthropology, I took a film class. I love movies. And the first film class I took was Intro into Writing Short Films. And I like generally speaking, I'm a very like late person. Like my punctuality is bad. But one key thing I noticed with my film class was that I was very like punctual. I wanted to be there and talk about screenplays. And I also realized in that class that I had been writing screenplays when I was in high school, but I didn't realize that was what I was doing. Like I was I was a class clown in high school and I started a fool fight one time. And so I was in school suspension for like 3 days and I didn't have schoolwork because we were seniors and so I didn't really have much schoolwork to do. And I was like, okay, so what am I doing in this class for, in this in school suspension for 3 days? And I actually wrote a short film, and I wrote the short film like a screenplay, even though I had never really seen a screenplay format. I wrote it like, action, then dialogue, character descriptions, all that stuff. So that like was a epiphany moment where I was like, wow, I think I'm a filmmaker. Like I think it's just innately in me to tell stories. I love everything about it, top to bottom, and it was like a no-brainer for me. I changed my major immediately and graduated with film, and Yeah,
That's kind of crazy how you had that like moment where you're like, oh my goodness, I've kind of already been doing this all
exactly.
along. When
Yeah.
I ended up at Cronkite, like I was just taking I think it was like a chemistry lab downstairs. And that
Wow.
was when I was studying political science as my major. And some girl named Alexis was like, you do really good in journalism. And I thought, girl, ain't nobody trying to do the newspaper. Like, and Alexis like, journalism is so much more than newspapers. You know, you're at the best school in the country for journalism. It's upstairs. There's a newsroom. And I was like, yeah, okay, you're probably full of it. And I took myself upstairs and interest like instantly was like, oh my goodness, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be at, and didn't realize that
Yeah.
me goofing off like you were, making YouTube videos as a kid and posting them on the internet without my parents' permission was really me jump starting my own career, being behind the camera in a way, and like having that opportunity to tell your own stories, whether it be through these music videos that I thought I was doing with Rihanna's Emergency Room and Usher, Hey Daddy, Justin Bieber.
Wow.
Yeah, I had to send that to you. That one, that channel is funny. I still
Hmm.
can't believe that that's where it started, like my passion. And I didn't realize too that there is an opportunity there for you to take it seriously
Yeah.
and get real life training for it. And Cronkite really gave me that opportunity. So it's awesome to see that you were able to figure that out while you were at ASU and
Yeah.
change your major just like I did and get on the path to where now you've done some really interesting work, from Her Affair to Die For on
Yeah.
Lifetime to background work on shows like Genius and Kindred. What was the transition like from student film sets to professional ones?
It's quick. It's like, no one is really asking you. Once you're on set, it's like we all expect you to be the professional that, we casted or we hired. And so it's very fast, and you kind of just want to not make a mistake. That was the biggest thing for me. The first feature film I was actually in was titled The Cleaner, and it was a young director. Her name is Brittany Harvey, and she's incredible. And it was my first time leading a feature film, and her set was so welcoming. And it was during COVID, so we always had to, take the thermometer to the forehead to make sure that none of us had it, and we had a lot of different procedures in order to become more of a family, even through that pandemic situation. So when I did the Lifetime film, I was expecting maybe a more grander experience, I guess. And it was more or less like what I've already been used to with student films. They were moving really fast and, cutting scenes left and right. And so the biggest thing when all that's happening is to make sure that you are kind of set in what you're supposed to be doing as an actor. Like, okay, what are my lines? Why am I feeling this way? What's my emotion? Stuff like that. And it's it's a good way to kind of just get yourself ready for being uncomfortable. A lot of times you have to be used to that because you're playing a character, everything's moving. They might change the scene around. They might say we're shooting this today, but we're actually shooting it tomorrow. Like things change. So it's always like really, really important to just find out where you're supposed to be or find who you're supposed to be in that moment, and then bam, because it happens like instantly. It happens really fast.
I can only imagine what that's like, and having, just like your script that you've memorized, but then being put in almost like a simulation where you're expected to just move with what's changing around you. And
Right.
I'm like a creature of habits. I can only imagine how I would respond in those kinds of situations. And I think
Oh
that's
yes.
something a lot of people don't think about when we are watching TV or watching movies, like all this media that we're consuming. You get a lot of people on the internet who do like shorts, like short films, and do a really
Hmm.
good job with those, and what goes behind that storytelling and the identity that you're building in the process of putting something together to be able to showcase and put it on camera. Why do you think it's so important for Black creatives to be both in front of and behind the camera?
You definitely just want to control the narrative, right? A lot of early film depicted black people as pretty much like inhuman, almost like we were animals. The biggest feature film of its time was Birth of a Nation. It was the first feature film to be over an hour long, and it's a movie that just it makes the Klan look like the Avengers and black people look like Thanos. We're the villains. It was the number one movie for 49 weeks. So it was extremely influential, and it depicted black people as a certain way, and that continued. And so as you become a black filmmaker, it's important to take control of your narrative and what you want to say, what you want to showcase. Because if not, then you leave it up to someone else, and that can be detrimental.
Right. Yeah, and what you were saying when we spoke the other day was, the birth of a nation. Not only is it kind of disturbing to see the way in which they're portraying people like us as Black individuals, but
Mhm.
it was also something that you saw quite frequently throughout
Yes.
studying film. Tell us more
Yeah.
about that.
It felt like every introductory film class I took, I had to watch that movie. And there were movies that they wouldn't allow us to watch because it might have been too graphic or the language was wrong. But at the same time, they always made us watch this movie. And it was to a point to where I would like skip it. I would skip the class or I would not do the homework assignment because I'm like, I'm not continuously going to watch this, racist depiction of, my community or my culture. And it's weird because, like I said, it is the first feature film to, be longer than an hour, and it was a huge box office success. So I understand the history, the film history of it all, but it's extremely racist, and it's just really tough to sit through multiple times in a row. Yeah, after a while, I think I had to watch it like twice, and after the second time, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I don't care what the homework assignment is. I'll take the zero. I'm just not doing it. Obviously you have to make those decisions when you're in the film industry because there a lot of things still are based in racism and misogyny and stuff like that. And you have to be conscious of like, okay, I'm not going to take this role, or I'm not comfortable writing this scene, or stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can only imagine what that would even be like. And, going to ASU, predominantly white school, and the
Hmm.
percentage of Black people that live in Phoenix is relatively low. I think it's under 5%. And
Exactly.
so being in those spaces, one, probably by yourself or one of the few that are in the room, and then continuously coming across this moment where you have to experience the same thing over and over, that's extremely uncomfortable. It kind of reminds me of, it's not the exact same thing, but when I would be in school growing up and we would watch a movie and slavery was somehow the topic to discuss, and we're watching a movie and everyone in class turns around and looks at me and I'm like, why are we looking at me? I'm not a slave. And it just makes you
Exactly.
super uncomfortable because it's just like, why, at what point is this like depicting, how many times do we need to depict this same story? And I felt like it was a broken record. It was every class
Exactly.
that I had where I get it, okay? Slavery existed, but at what extent? And when we're not necessarily in a position to have dialogue around why we're watching certain things, and it be directed towards those that are non people of color,
Hmm.
particularly in the way that you're engaging with others in the classroom when those types of things are being shown. I think those kind of cautionary like discretions should be really integrated within those kinds of environments because it can be traumatizing. I mean, I hated going to social studies and history class because I knew if that they rolled out that TV, we were watching something and a slave was going to pop up there and turn around and look at me.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's like they don't think about how that those implications can I don't know, affect us like mentally. And it's up to us to be aware of that. And it's kind of unfair because we're kind of distorted into it. But as you get older, you're like, okay, I need to be more conscious about this and these experiences.
Yeah, that is true. And like when we spoke before, you mentioned how you watched the new movie Sinners that came out like a month or two ago, and you had watched it twice. You watched it once in a white theater, like mostly white people were in the theater, and then the
Hmm.
second time where there were mostly blacks in the theater. And the experience that you shared with me was very interesting. I'd love to have you break that down
Yeah.
and kind of explain what that experience was like and why you think these types of films are important for us to have on the screen.
100%. So yeah, I saw Sinners twice, and the first time I saw it, it was at a predominantly white theater, and then the second time I saw it was with a predominantly black theater, right? And the first time I saw it,
Hmm.
I enjoyed the movie, and I thought it was very cool, and there were certain scenes that I thought were very awesome cinematically. And then the second time I saw it with the black audience, there were scenes that we reacted to that the first audience didn't. And I was talking to my girlfriend about it, and I was like, you know what the difference is that black people live in a state where we have to be hyper aware about certain body languages, gestures, certain lines. So there's a scene in Sinners where they send out the young lady to go talk to the three white vampires, and she's talking. She's the center of the scene, and all you see is a hand come and touch her shoulder. When I saw this scene in the white theater, nobody, reacted to that. But in the black theater, everyone goes, "Ooh, no, don't touch me. Ooh, don't, girl." All that stuff was happening because we're just hyper aware of those small microaggressions or those gestures. The biggest thing, obviously, like I said, was just the difference in response to the smaller things that are caught on screen, and how we are more aware of that because of the fact that of how we have to live within society. It makes it kind of more personal to us.
Right. Yeah, you don't really think about it when or other people don't think about it as much as we do. And when you're with one another at the same time, it kind of echoes that same experience of
Exactly.
like we have these real lived experiences that are very similar that we've come across. But then when you're in certain environments, it's almost foreign to, and it's not something that comes up as something that's represented overall.
Right. Yep.
And in terms of your own work, how does representation affect what kinds of stories you want to tell?
It's very important. I try. It's going to sound kind of pretentious, but I try not to write films that are like genre based because genre films can become kind of tropey, and like a trope is just like if if the lead lady is running away from the killer and she looks back, we know that she's gonna fall or trip or something like that. That's a trope that you kind of get used to because you've seen so many horror films, things like that. So the biggest thing for me now when I write movies is to make sure that it's very real to culture, because the more realistic it is to what we already know, the more you connect it to the story. It's very predictable and it's not engaging. But when you incorporate culture into what you're telling, and what you're showcasing, it makes people connect to it, and then also you can subvert their ideas about what's going to happen next because you kind of have them connected, which is great too.
As someone that's in the audience, you're not thinking of it that way, but you are thinking of it as, oh, wow, this is really predictable, or wow, I didn't even see that coming. I just
Exactly.
watched this new film that came out on Apple TV, and it had Sydney Sweeney. She was one of the main characters.
Uh-huh.
It's called Echo Valley, I believe. Super good film, and there were moments where I totally thought I knew what was gonna happen, but then in the end, I was so blown at the way in which the story actually unfolded. And those are the ones that really keep you tied in,
Exactly.
sitting there, pausing it when you actually have to go to the bathroom or refill on your snacks, and not just letting it run in the background and
Yeah.
keeping the audience engaged because you're able to connect with the culture. And I think that's really beautiful that you are aware of that and actively trying to do something about it when you go about showing representation in the stories that you start telling yourself when you're behind the scenes and putting a script together and
Yeah.
really just bringing it to life. What's your process like when you're preparing for a role after you've done all this work, you've thought out everything? What is your process like when you're preparing for a role emotionally and physically?
Biggest thing for me is mentality. The more I can understand the mentality of my character, the better I can display his emotions through a scene or on set. And so for the die for Marcus is a supportive boyfriend, but he's also kind of oblivious to the reality of what's going on in the movie. And so I've been that as a boyfriend. I can be supportive and also oblivious at the same time. So it wasn't that hard for me to kind of get into character. There are certain scenes and things like that, emotions that you might have to display on camera that you're not used to displaying. So a lot of times, if I have to be more vulnerable, I realized that I needed to listen to a certain song to kind of get me there to be in that state, because I can be kind of guarded with my emotions, and so my character requires more of me. And so there's always a process, and it depends on the character. But a lot of times for me, it starts with the mentality. What's the mentality of this character, and what are they trying to achieve in this scene, and what were they doing before this scene to kind of help lead into the scene and lead into the actual dialogue or action.
I love that you talk about the different ways that you prepare and also the context of the situation as well. And just like in the real world, I think when you're preparing for certain things, whether that be emotionally or physically, you always kind of take what has happened previously into consideration when you're
Right.
going into anything. It's kind of cool to see the similarities of how, where film has a lot of parallels with reality and the way that you go about preparing for it, and we're drawing from a lot of inspiration that happens on a day to day, and you're listening to music and putting yourself in a certain mindset. And I think that has a lot to show that how much it really takes to be a part of these kinds of roles and opportunities, but to really showcase what it is that the producer and everyone else that's been a part of the team has set forth for your role specifically.
Yeah, 100%.
Has there ever been a role or set experience that really stayed with you a lot longer after filming? Like it took a minute for you to shake?
Yes, I think when my first day on set, I did background. I was a core background for this TV show called Kindred. It got canceled, but it was a TV show that dealt with slavery, and it dealt with time travel and stuff like that. Initially, I was casted, and it was described to me as if I would be in a pre-colonial time, more or less dressed like George Washington or something like that, or those that era.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I got to costumes for 2 weeks before we actually started shooting, the attire they gave me was slavery attire. I looked like Jim Crow. And I was like, what is going on? And so I talked to my parents about it. And my mom was actually someone who she was like saying that when you go to set, you are this character, but when you leave it alone. Don't bring it home. It's only, so long in a day and not doing it for 24 hours, so don't worry about it, sitting with you. And so I was prepared as much as I possibly could be for this role. But then once I got on set and I went on a plantation and I had to go stand in the field, and and the props guy is giving me a rake, and I'm just like, man, this is kind of weird. It's surreal, right? And I don't know my background castmates, so we're all looking at each other like, what is going on, right? And at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
producers are coming up and like, this looks great. They take a picture of you with their cell phone, right? What looks great? So now you're like, so now you're combative because someone is taking a picture of you saying you look great, but you don't know how to take that. It's different if I look like Spider-Man. Of course, I look great in
Right.
the costume. Now, you know what I mean. So it's a lot, and I think that first day was probably the most tough day for me to shake because it was just a lot going on, and yeah, it was surreal, surreal.
Wow. When you said that, people in production are coming up to you and taking pictures, I wouldn't even know how to respond to that because at that moment you're already contemplating, why am I even here?
Exactly.
This is not even what I thought I had signed up for. I was
Exactly.
kind of catfished into this position, and
Right.
you're there on the other side thinking they're doing such a great job depicting the story that they so clearly wanted to tell. But then at the end of it, you're sitting there kind of reliving a lot of the traumas and experiences, being on a plantation,
Right.
which I personally have never been on, and I've heard stories and
You can
people
skip it.
talk about
You can
it.
skip it. You don't have to go. Take my word.
I mean, there's just so much. They always say like if the trees could talk,
Right.
like what really happened hundreds of years ago and how our people were treated, and to kind of be
And
recreating a scene like that,
the interesting thing
I
too
can
about
only
it is
imagine.
also that this set had a bunch of like on set mishaps that I never seen. So like a tree collapsed onto the producer's car one time. People were passing out to the heat. Like it was a lot of stuff that I had never seen before, and it was I think like you said, it's like the trees were talking to us and telling us to get out of there. Really.
That's actually crazy that you say that. It kind of reminds me of like some of the stories people have told about Lake Lanier that's out there near Atlanta, and how it's over a black town that
Yes.
was just
Yes.
essentially filled with water.
Yes.
People talk about, you shouldn't go there because people have just kind of gone missing, or people who have experienced things have talked about feeling like something was pulling them down.
Yeah, yeah. I just talked to my dad about that yesterday. There's someone just unfortunately drowned in Lake Lanier like 2 days ago, and I was telling my dad the
Wow.
history that Lake Lanier was, like you said, a black town. It didn't they just flooded the town and then made a lake over it, which was obviously terrible. And now every year Lake Lanier is like catching somebody else, and I don't know why people still swim there. But yeah, no, these it's very real, very much so.
Those kinds of experiences are like really emotionally disorienting
Yeah,
between the background work you did on Kindred and then having the introductory classes and your film major constantly trying to show you Birth of a Nation, which
yes,
you said you had to watch all the time. Like, and you got to the point where it's like, I can't keep doing this. I'm not going to
exactly,
do it. I'll just take the zero.
exactly.
How did those kinds of experiences shape the way that you approach roles now?
I'm very conscious of perception. I was looking at an interview where Dave Chappelle was talking about why he left his TV show on Comedy Central, and he said that he was doing a sketch where he was in blackface, and he was joking, but he looked around and he saw that the production team was laughing at him not for the joke, but because he was in blackface, and it freaked him out.
Mm.
So when I get certain roles, even if it's like a commercial, if I feel like it's a joke on blackness, I can't do it. If I feel like, oh, the person who's writing this actually doesn't have the best interest of the depiction of the culture, I can't do it, and I won't do it. Like I had a bunch of commercials when I first started my talent agency, and two of them were like a sports commercial, and one was like a Sprite commercial. The third commercial they sent me was like a Black and Milds commercial, and it was like a smoking commercial, but they wanted me to look a certain way, and I'm like, okay, I understand like I'm acting, but if I feel a way, I feel a way, and I can't. I'm a Gemini, so I'm very much so. I don't have a poker face. If I don't like it, I can't act like I don't like it. So yeah, if I don't feel comfortable with it, I'm just not going to do it. Period. I'm just not, and I'll live with that. Not taking that role. And
Well, kudos to you for being able to listen to yourself and kind of check in with yourself and just acknowledge that it wasn't something that you were willing to do.
yeah,
And being able to stick to your gut feeling, which a lot of times is hard, especially when you're starting out
oh
and
yes,
you feel like you have to be readily available to take whatever opportunities people are throwing your way.
right.
You don't have the opportunity to say no.
Mm.
And you were able to distinguish that's not the type of work that you want to be a part of, and just the idea and way that you're perpetuating blackness. And I love that you identified that so early on and being able to see that, if it's a joke on blackness, you can't do
I
it.
can't do it.
There's being funny and
Exactly,
things being laughable, but then there's what is the underlying message here? What are
exactly,
we really sending?
and that's why.
Is it ever, or go ahead.
And that's what's interesting about that Sinners scene. When I saw Sinners in the white theater, no one reacted to the lady touching her shoulder, but in the black theater, everyone reacted. We catch those nuances because we live in that world where we have to be aware of that. Same thing when going into an audition, or if I'm writing a character, like what's the nuance in this action or this dialogue that I want to make sure is true.
Besides the nuances, like I love that you bring that up because you're getting probably thrown with your agency. They're giving you different opportunities to be a part of, most of which they probably hope you just take, but
Mhm.
you want to be very intentional with how you put yourself in front of the camera or even behind it. How do you go about just like evaluating those projects now that you've had all these different experiences? What helps you know if it's right or if it's not, even
I
if it's not necessarily race related?
I'm lucky that or I'm fortunate that I'm able to write film and produce film, direct film, and not just act. Because when you are limited to just one pathway, then you're more inclined to be desperate to take everything and anything. And because I'm like, you know what? I know my goal is to make great movies. I don't need to rush and just take every role. I can say no to some things. And I have the privilege of having a great support system and stuff like that. So I don't need to be as gimme, 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 gimme. I can say, you know what, this is not for me. I can decline this. And I know that film is, it's so interesting because you're just one movie, one commercial away from being the person. And so it's not like I don't feel as though if I say no to something, I'll never get another opportunity. I know that it's just a matter of time, and therefore I don't really worry too hard heavy about like putting something down. I'm quick to say nope, I'm not doing this easily. Like, and I know my
Oh,
agency,
that's good.
they might not like it, but you know they'll get over it.
I think that's good to share and something other people who are also pursuing opportunities in film and them searching and finding their own identity and voice behind what they choose and choose not to be a part of.
Mhm.
Like it's okay not to say yes to every single thing. And that's kind of just the cost of storytelling. Not
Exactly.
everything is going to be for you. Not every opportunity that comes your way is meant for you. And it's okay to turn those things down. And I think overall, like we see how if you do say yes to certain things, I think I remember seeing something about Will Smith saying he didn't want to do certain kinds of video or movies and stuff
Uh-huh.
when he was filming, and he didn't want to be like pigeon-tailed into one type of character and
Exactly.
constantly doing certain things. And we see a lot of movies or actors who sometimes you see them filmed in similar types of films.
Yeah.
And it kind of brings me back to Tyler Perry's Straw, which just came out, and I think it was number one on Netflix for
Yeah.
a little bit, might still be. And, this is a really controversial topic right now. Like, there are people on one side of the field that say the film is great. It does a really good job bringing Black voices to life and really
Mhm.
showcasing what it's like to be a Black single mother and struggling and
Mhm.
going through poverty, et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, there are people who are saying, this is kind of traumatic to keep having this tension that we're seeing, this visible tension of trauma where Black women are constantly struggling,
Yeah.
and it's kind of repetitive, and we are at the point where we want to see more than just us struggling on the screen. We want to see us being successful. We
Right.
want to see us doing things in that sense of representation of what you're aiming for, to be able to showcase us in a brighter light instead of necessarily focused on the past as much. And I'd love to discuss what your take is on that, because I'm kind of in the middle. I see both sides.
Yeah.
I appreciate it for what it is. I think it does show the truth, but at the same time, it is a lot to watch
Yeah.
because it is sad. How many more of these can I take?
And see, I'm jaded because obviously, like I said, I'm a film major, so we had to watch a lot of the classic black films and stuff like that. But my mother, she saw Straw, and she was telling me the storyline of it, and it is traumatic. Taraji goes through a lot in this movie, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yes.
And so I saw Tyler Perry's response to the criticism saying that just because you might not want to see it doesn't mean that these struggles aren't happening. And so there's truth to both sides. I think, like me personally, I'm not trying to watch the black trauma films anymore because that's all they show when we were in film school. So I'm like, I'm not trying to see Dr. King get shot again, and stuff like
Hmm.
that. But it is a story for people to see, and there is some reality to these stories. And sometimes, it's dramatic. It's a film, so a film will be dramatic and have some
Hmm.
extra stuff in there. But I guess I'm with you, Mike. I'm in the middle. Like I choose not to watch it, but those stories are important too because people do go through traumatic experiences on a daily basis. And so it's a story that needs to be told, even though I might not be fond of watching it. It's
Yeah.
someone is. I don't think if Tyler Perry was depicting Taraji as in a negative light, then we would all react a certain way. So it's not that he's depicting, black women in a negative light. It's just that he's showing them endure through extreme trauma, which is tough to watch. It's like watching a gory horror film for some people, right?
Hmm.
It's like it's not that the horror film is bad. It's just that there's so much gore that it's not for you. So that's what it is for me. It's like, all right, I'm cool on this trauma stuff.
Yeah, I totally get that. And for me, it was like watching it, there were moments where I was like, oh my goodness, this is a little far-fetched. But then it would like reel me back in, and my emotions were so heightened because the things that she was saying and in the script
Hmm.
with certain points throughout the movie where I just felt really captivated
Hmm.
by what they were displaying and them relating that back to current day,
Yeah.
how it truly is a depiction of what some Black women are going through.
Hmm.
It's just difficult to watch, and seeing other people's reactions on the internet. Like I saw this one video on TikTok, and there was this white woman, and she's like crying and she says, I hate Tyler Perry because it was very emotionally captivating. At the same time, it is just hard as a Black person to balance how much of that you decide to consume. And obviously,
Exactly.
you're at the point where they kind of drilled that into you very quickly. So, in such a short amount of time, that now you're at a point being involved in the industry at that, being able to keep your headspace clear, to be able to participate and show up in the roles that you're taking on probably has a lot to do with that as well.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. You know, we talked about it beforehand about like if I was offered a role in a Civil War or civil rights movement era movie, would I take it? And I'm like, that's a really good question, you know, because it's a role, right? But at the same time, do I want to endure the weight of that era, things of that nature? You know, I did background on this TV show called Genius, and one of the scenes I had to walk in with Dr. King for a sit-in, and they were grabbing two stunt guys who were with us, and they would grab them. They put spaghetti plates in their face. They beat them down, and we kind of had to sit there, let it happen, and then we all got arrested. And we had to do like 7 takes of that scene. After a while, you kind of like, all right, you touch me again, we really gonna fight. You know what I mean? Like, stop touching me. But
Yeah.
so it can definitely, and that was just one day of shooting. I was on Genius for a few days, so it definitely is a lot, when especially dealing with black trauma. And so it's just one of those things we have to sit back and really contemplate, like, do I want to endure this for the next 3 months, or next 6 months of filming?
Yeah. When you think about just like all that you have experienced and what you enjoy being a part of and what you'd like to consider, what type of things do you think audiences are craving more of right now? There's this in between with maybe we chill out on the trauma films and depicting so much trauma. What do you think people are craving?
Audiences are interesting. I think that black people have always wanted honesty, like they want truth in whatever they're watching, whether it's a comedy, action film, or a drama, a horror film. If it's honest, black people will be there. I think that's why Get Out was so great, because Get Out was like, his reaction was
Mm.
very honest, and it allowed us to, kind of be kind of captives as well, as we were trying to tell him to get out, because so I think that for black audiences, it's honesty. I think that some audiences are still very much so in love with spectacle. So you see a lot of major pictures that have a lot of action and flair and stuff like that, but the story isn't really that, unique, but it's very flashy. And so there's still that, a crowd that loves that, just fireworks, 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 right? We have 11 Fast and Furious movies. I don't know what they driving now. They have 11 of those movies going. I just saw the new Mission Impossible, and that guy is jumping out of planes, rocket ships, all types of stuff, and it's just like, okay. I mean, but it looks like that there's a big love for nostalgia too, right? We have a lot of films that are coming back. They're live action. A lot of cartoons we watched as kids, like Lilo and Stitch and stuff like that, is live action now. Lion King, I'm like, wow. So there's a love for nostalgia. There's a love for, obviously, comic book movies are pretty big, and I think there's just, for like I said, for black people, we love honesty and truth within what we watch. If it's not authentic, we're not gonna, we can't really resonate with it.
For one, when I'm watching things, not that I'm like some major film critic or anything like that, like, my opinion's very valid, but in the sense of someone that's been behind and in front of the camera with journalism and thinking of the representation that's left behind and the truth that is overall being left with me at the end of the day. Like, what was the whole point of this?
Yeah,
Sometimes, yeah, I'm watching a horror film, so it was just like to scare me
exactly.
kind of thing. Okay, got it. Check the box. Maybe it didn't. Honestly, I believe that horror films today suck. It just
Yes. Yeah.
misses the point. Like, and it might have a lot to do with the fact that my aunt had me watching Freddy Krueger at way too early of an age.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
may have like
Same here.
desensitized
Yeah.
myself to the point where nothing actually
Scares
creeps
you.
me out. I went to the movie theater to watch Sinners with my friends, and
Hmm.
we're walking to the car. My friend's like, "Let me drive you. I don't want anything, like, I don't want anyone to snatch you up." And I'm like, "Girl, like, I'm fine."
Yeah,
Like, I'm not even thinking about that. I'm actually getting ready to head to bed. I know you're a little nervous and
exactly.
I'm completely okay. I went and saw Final Destination
Mm,
the other day, and I love that we're starting to get into bringing back some of those really
classic.
popular
Yeah.
movies and classics that used to come out back in the day. And I actually enjoyed it. I think it wasn't more so like horror for
Hmm.
me, it was more of a thrill
Yeah,
and kind of like a little bit of adrenaline and like not really knowing what's happening next. But
exactly.
I definitely enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of that.
Yeah.
And hopefully they can bring back. I'd love to see if they can and bring back, what is it, the night, A Night on Elm
Oh
Street,
yeah, Nightmare.
because that was my thing.
It
I used
was
to
too.
walk
Yeah, me
around the
too.
house and put pencils in my
Oh
fingers and
yeah.
scare my little sister acting like Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, I love Freddy Krueger. That was like my favorite monster growing up. I just thought he was so. I think that he helped me get over fear in a way because he would make like smart remarks, like funny remarks before he killed somebody. So I was like, oh,
Mm,
that's actually not that scary. It's actually kind of cool in a weird way. My grandmother had a bunch of classic horror films that she had on VHS, and I used to get scared just off the like the artwork, but then I would watch the film and have to get used to it. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. A lot of horror films today are just about the jump scares. They don't really actually try to scare
yeah,
you. It's just like we're gonna have loud sounds pierce your ear right now, and someone gets stabbed, and it's like, all right, well that's predictable. It's not that scary. So
pretty much. I appreciate that you brought up how Freddy Krueger helped you get over fear.
yeah.
And maybe that's what he did for me too, because nothing really scares me in that sense.
Hmm.
And I'm kind of like drawn to wanting to watch stuff to see if there's anything that'll get me to that level, like it did when I was young.
Yeah.
How do you personally manage that emotional cost that comes with like telling difficult stories, especially being black?
Yeah. The this is like a secret, but no, I'll tell you. So like if you're a screenwriter in school, they called it like you're a world builder, and they were like you can't build a world if you don't understand your world. So if I know that majority of people are on social media now, and on social media people might see a video of cats, they'll scroll down, they'll see a building explode, then they'll scroll down, they'll see someone get their head chopped off, then they'll see a football touchdown the next thing. So people are exposed to hypersensitive imagery all day, 24/7. So that's not what I can scare them with because they're used to that. So now I have to think of a different way of how to scare people. What's terrifying today? And I think that, in my opinion, it's subtlety. It's actually the things that you're, not paying attention to that is
Hmm.
more or less horrifying and things of that nature. And so, in the films that I've written that are more or less horror films or nightmarish, it's not really about the jump scares. It's more or less about the subtlety of what happens in the film. And also, just like a lot of horror films, they write teenagers as really stupid, which is not realistic. And so I try to write them. The thing about nightmares is that, like, the reason why nightmares are scary is because you do the right thing, right? You're fighting the monster, but your punches aren't actually hurting the monster. That's what's scary. You make the right decision, but it doesn't work out. So when I write a horror film, I write the characters to do the right thing. I call 911, but there's no signal. Things of that nature, that where it's like you're trying to make the right decisions, but it just doesn't happen, and that's what makes it more scary or scarier. And so yeah.
Hmm, that's interesting. And like when being on the other side of it, that subtlety of the things that you don't expect to happen. I'm thinking of, I think it was G20 I just watched with
Oh
Viola
yeah,
Davis.
yeah,
And on Amazon Prime, I think what you mentioned, like sometimes horror not necessarily is like raw or scary,
exactly.
but what was kind of thrilling, I guess, or like surprising to me, what I didn't expect, and something that was very subtle, was they have a group of leaders and politicians in this
Hmm.
room, and they're trying to take over and flip the market, and they basically get them to record a video where they're just saying a bunch of random words so they can use AI and create a deep fake of them having conversations while they were at the conference they were at,
Wow.
saying things that were not what they said. And in that moment, it kind of hit me almost like watching Final Destination, where it's like, this is the stuff that's actually scary.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is the subtle
exactly.
things that are actually happening. And then something pops up on TikTok, and it's like this video of a news anchor saying that war has been declared on Canada. And I was watching it and I just sat there in silence. I'm like, first of all, I went to school for journalism, so just try a little harder with your fact
Exactly,
checking and just
exactly.
sit there and consume it and then go search it. And then afterwards, the reporter's like, hey, yeah, blah, 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 blah. That's actually fake news. That did
Hmm.
not happen.
Right,
This is a great example of the technology that's available with AI.
exactly.
And that's the creepy stuff that's
Yeah,
kind of like subtly throwing me off in these films,
yeah.
because these are the kinds of things that are happening kind of behind the scenes that we need to be more aware of.
Isn't it so interesting that like Hollywood was kind of preparing for Kamala to win because G20, the president is a black woman. In Mission
Mm-hmm.
Impossible, the president is a black woman. And then there's another
Mm-hmm.
movie on Netflix where Angela Bassett is the president, if I'm not mistaken, or she's the VP.
And I just watched it. I can't think of
It's
it.
like her and Robert De Niro, I think, or something like that. I can't remember, but
Yes.
they were ready for her to win, but obviously things went differently. But yeah, no, like you said, the integration of AI in film and in film narrative is very, very terrifying because you're out of control, right? You're out of the control of what happens next and what is truth, what is reality, and that's dangerous.
Hmm. I met someone when I was out in LA and I was doing Cronkite News out there, and they had told me that what's happening on TV is probably the most accurate depiction of what's happening in real life, and how we're seeing things that kind of almost prepare us for what's to come. And there is the Netflix movie. I think the Obamas were
Yes, yes,
involved in
yeah,
producing that one. Yeah,
yeah,
like Leave the World Behind.
yes,
And that one really, because it's those subtle things
yeah,
where it's like Teslas are driving themselves and
right,
running into walls.
exactly.
And then suddenly we're having issues with Teslas
Exactly. Yes.
driving around parking lots in San Francisco and unable to be shut off. Like,
Exactly.
and we're starting to see all these random instances of these things that media has kind of put in front of us. What are your thoughts and take on that? And how often do you feel you're playing a part in that?
Yeah, I think that a lot of times what we see in film is going to happen within a year. Like film is like, in a weird way to manifest something, or it's already happening. So they're just trying to showcase it in a different way. Like I remember 2019, I think Endgame happened, and like half the world dies in Endgame, and then we go right into the pandemic. It was like
Mm,
very surreal how we all like, had to go inside, and some people, obviously, a lot of people lost family members and friends and stuff like that, and it was just like so. It's very, it's just really weird. You have to be kind of careful with film and how you write certain things, but at the same time, you want to be honest and truthful, right? So the movie that Leave the World Behind that the Obamas produced is crazy because pretty much everything they showed in that film, not everything, but like a lot of things have happened. Like, the scene where he's like at the beach and the plane comes and crashes into the beach. And then this year alone,
yes.
we've had like 17 plane crashes that we've never seen before. And it's just like,
Mhm.
man. And like you said with the Teslas, it's like they just seem like they're malfunctioning randomly now. And every rocket that goes up now won't come back down. I'm like, what's going on here, And
Mhm.
as writers, you have to kind of be like an amateur sociologist. You kind of have to look at society and what's going on to kind of build your world. Like I said, you want to make a world that mirrors the one you're in, even if you're writing a space story. So sometimes writers are prophetic with what they see. Sometimes they're right on point in what they're trying to showcase. So yeah, it's very interesting.
Man, it's so crazy how what we're watching on film and on TV can really translate, and how just intentional people can be in the messages that they're sending
Yeah,
across. It's not just like this comedy that's just all jokes,
yeah,
shits and gigs.
exactly.
It's actually something that's kind of highlighting an underlying theme that might be issues that we're currently dealing with in our current political
Mhm.
environment. So it's really interesting to see that kind of play out. I want to talk a little bit, since we talked about this and kind of applies to life as a whole, and what lessons that you've been able to learn from film and beyond entertainment. Storytelling is very powerful. We've
Mhm.
seen that with journalism, and we can see that in filmmaking.
Mhm.
What are some lessons that you've learned from film that apply to life?
That's a good question. Film has made me appreciate diversity. In film school, you work with different people in your class to make a short. You meet different people from different fields. Maybe someone who's working on production, like they want to control lights and grip. You meet someone who's behind the camera, a cinematographer, a DP, myself, a writer. You meet the actor. You meet all these different people, and you realize the value of diversity, and you realize the value of having people who want to be there, right? I've been on film sets where you have people who are rushing because they don't want to be on the set, or they're dragging their feet because don't want to be there, and how it can mess up the process. And so now when I talk to, like, when it comes to friends or teams and stuff like that, it's like I want to work with people who love what they do and want to be a part of the process. Filmmaking has kind of showed that to me, showed me how great it can be when you work with great people, and how great people can actually make a story even greater. The screenplay is just like the skeletal system of the body, but you don't get the full body until you add in everyone else, and it's very, very important. Your actors will take a line you wrote and make it 10 times better by taking something out, right? You need that collaboration. You need to see that. You need to be a part of that. So the biggest thing I've kind of learned from film is just to be open to collaborate and meet more people and use that collaboration to build better worlds. The more people I meet, the more experiences I have, the better I can actually tell you stories as a writer and as a filmmaker.
When we were talking last week about the collaboration aspect and the crafting that goes behind the scenes of everything that we're seeing on TV.
Yeah.
And, back in the day, when we rewatch a lot of these old films, I gave the example of Shark Boy and Lava Girl,
Yeah.
and there's that scene where he bites this like metal bar off and it's like flying, and the just CG just looks
Terrible.
absolutely ridiculous because it doesn't really fit in with where we are now and
Right.
how much craft goes into that, and how you have been inspired just by watching the sound engineers and set
Yeah.
sculptors who really play a part into this overall vibe that you get when you're watching movies like Leave the World Behind,
Yeah.
and every little piece that's a part of it really makes you feel
Mhm.
what the story is, trying to make you feel. And
Right.
you feel very captured because you're not distracted by the random pieces of metal that are flying across the screen that where the green screen caught off. Like,
Exactly.
it's really cool to think about how that collaboration piece plays a huge role into what we're seeing every single day. And it wouldn't be that if it had not been for all these different roles that clearly play a part.
Yeah.
Has there been any moment where you've been watching or creating a project that you made and kind of reflected or changed something in your own life based on something you experienced?
It's a good question. Um,
I'm glad my journalistic skills still work.
you stumped me. I think that when I do commercials, usually I'll get like a hero role, like that's like the lead role for a commercial, and they'll um, refer to you as the hero. They also will kind of cater to you because they want you to be the most prepped for the shot and stuff like that. And that helps build a level of confidence. But whether I'm the hero or the supporting role, whatever, I should still have that confidence regardless. And so I remember that experience of being the hero in the hero role in this commercial or whatever. But at the same time, wanting to carry that same confidence regardless of where I am or what role I'm playing on set because it's caught. The camera's going to catch all of that. Yeah, that's one thing I definitely kind of just picked up from a film set. It's just to remember to stay confident and believe in who I am and what I'm doing.
That's something that everyone can apply to their own lives.
Yeah,
As we're going through life and we're experiencing different situations, being able to carry that confidence to get you through the next step is extremely important because, like you said, the camera's going to capture it. And chances are other people in the room that you're in or whatever
exactly.
setting you're in are going to capture that lack of confidence that you have in being able to really put your best foot forward and
Yeah.
make your it's like they say, fake it till you make it. And I've gotten that too. People are like, how do you do that? Da, da, da. You seem so confident. I'm like, I was literally shaking in my boots, but I'm
Exactly.
so glad that you believed that I was doing great.
Exactly.
And I brought that confidence to life that I really wanted to exude. And some people might say, "Oh, you're just like being fake. That's not being real." But it's like, no, I'm helping myself overcome
Exactly.
challenges
Right.
because this is how you're going to become successful. And whether we're talking about being in the filmmaking industry or just in everyday life
Right.
and going through the motions and dealing with the things that we have to deal with every single day as adults and having to put on this confident face to be able to conquer what's coming our way.
Yep. 100%. It's important. You deserve to be here. You're here for a reason. You shouldn't feel less. You shouldn't feel like you need to be quiet or in the corner. Like, no, you're here for a reason. Stand up for yourself. Speak up for yourself. Believe in yourself.
Believe in yourself, guys. That's very important. Even if you don't necessarily feel it,
Mhm.
just tell yourself that. And at some point, you'll gaslight yourself enough to believe it. We're all in it together,
Exactly,
and
exactly.
it's being able to have these kinds of conversations that we realize how alike we all are. And we all
Mhm.
struggle with certain things. No one is perfect at anything. And as you go through life and we share these kinds of stories and have these kinds of conversations, across the board, we realize how much we are as human beings. And that's the whole theme of this podcast, to navigate what it's like to be an adult and the chaos that comes along with it, and it pops up in every aspect of our life. And so being confident and trying to exude this level of belief that you have in yourself is extremely important. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I would love to gather just like your final thoughts on something that you'd love to see more in the film industry. Obviously, you've been working through it for some time now and you've gotten your own experiences. What kinds of stories are you personally most excited to create? And what's something you're looking forward to seeing more?
I definitely want to see more original stories like Sinners, just more original stories, new characters, new narratives, and new plot lines. I think that audiences today will really benefit from new storytellers, new actors, all that stuff, because that's how we evolve, right? If we continue telling the same stories, we're not really doing anything, but we're kind of being stagnant, actually. So I'm a proponent of newness. Even when I'm old, I'll still be a proponent of newness. And yeah, so that's one of the things that I hope to bring to the world too, is new stories, new characters, new everything, I guess.
Well, here's to seeing you involved in new plots, new original stories and narratives, and anything that exudes the idea of newness,
Exactly.
because there's so much that comes along with that. You know, repeating the same old thing can get old. And I think that's kind of what we've been seeing for a while now with a lot of what's coming out and this whole controversy with AI and people using that to kind of substitute
Yeah,
storytelling to an extent.
yeah.
And so I'm really excited to see what all work you continue to be a part of and keeping up with you. So I just appreciate your presence and being here today.
No, thank
And
you.
my last question is, what does it mean to be? As you know, the podcast is Being with Micah. So we're trying to explore the idea of being as a human, and especially in the context of your life being behind the scenes and in the making, what does it mean to you?
For me, being is presence, like being present of what's happening in front of you, what you're feeling, right? When you're an actor, one thing I practice all the time is how I feel. Whether I'm in traffic angry or I'm in extreme joy, I see my mom, my dad, I'm very present in what I'm feeling and what's happening. And that allows me to really appreciate being. And so to me, that's the biggest thing, is just being present and what's happening. What's going on? What's going on?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Practice how you're feeling.
Hmm.
I've never really thought of it that way, like put it into words, because I feel like that's what I was doing before I started this podcast. I started recording and you hopped on. Like I was getting irritated
Uh-huh.
with my technology, and I was subconsciously telling myself like it's going to be just fine. Like you worked in IT with Jon.
Right, exactly.
You're so prepared for this moment for something to go wrong and to fix it yourself. People used to call you for help.
Exactly. We were the
Now you
go-to.
figure it out. So I'm practicing this better, mindfulness of everything's going to be okay. Everything's just fine. This podcast is going to go perfectly. I'm going to get my microphone working and things are just going to go smoothly. And so that's something everyone can kind of take away here.
Right.
Practice what you're feeling
Yeah.
and being present. And that's something that I love and will continue to keep with me as we go through each of these different episodes. And I just want to say thank you so much
No problem.
for sharing your journey, your honesty, and your insight with us today. You've given us a real look into the beauty and complexity of storytelling, especially as a Black creative navigating this film industry. I am very grateful for your time, and I know listeners are walking away with something real to think about. Are there any last minute things that you want to bring up?
No, I'm glad that I met you, honestly. Working in the Cronkite building, that was my first time really seeing a news set too. So I was like, this is incredible. And it kind of made me want to look into journalism when I was, even as a film major. It's just so cool to see how they structured you guys' process into becoming your own professional journalists, which is awesome. The newsroom, it just felt like I was in the Daily Planet with Superman. I was like, wow, this is crazy. And I'm really, really honored to be a part of this podcast and talk to you and catch up with you. Anytime you need me, I'm there because, we understand each other as storytellers, as creatives, as tech consultants. We just need that. So thank you so much, Micah.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate it. What we watch isn't just entertainment, it shapes how we see the world and how the world sees us. And in this conversation with Jon Brown, we got to sit with that truth. From turning down roles that don't serve the culture, to navigating the emotional toll of Black trauma narratives, to finding joy and intention behind the camera. Jon reminded us that storytelling is powerful and personal. So if you're someone who cares about representation, about legacy, or just what it means to live in alignment with your values, this episode was for you. And our next episode, we're flipping the lens. We're talking about the stories we consume, not just in movies, but in the news. I'm joined by anchor and reporter Jordan Ryan, a new mom and former NBA dancer, as we dive into how to stay informed without getting emotionally exhausted, how to spot misinformation, and why local news might matter more than you think. Because storytelling shapes us even when it's not on a screen. See you next time.